Hello and welcome to Think in the Circle. Today we are talking all about how you can manage your PhD supervisor. I'm going to give you 4 don'ts and 8 do's, little hints and tips that you could utilize or adapt so that you can have a much better, much fruitful relationship with your supervisor. So let's first talk about the type of supervisors that you might get. Now, talking in extremes here. On the one side, you might get that professor who is the egomaniac, it's all about me. And on the other extreme, you can get that supervisor who's super kind, always out there to look after you. The other variable would be that that supervisor is either super knowledgeable, they know everything about your topic and the methods that you might be choosing, or they could be clueless. And yes, it can happen a number of ways. Somebody might get lucky and get some research grant, or maybe your original supervisor has moved to another country or another university and you're left with a supervisor that is not as knowledgeable as the original supervisor that you had. It happens sometimes. Of course, if you have somebody who is both an egomaniac and clueless, you might get a case of bullying. Nothing stops an egomaniac type of professor who is also knowledgeable to be a bully, but hopefully some of the hints and tips that I give you might help you to navigate this. The other extreme to the bullying would be that knowledgeable and super kind supervisor who's always there, that guardian angel who's always there to look after your needs. They're rare, they exist. Be kind to them in return. And you have to remember that the system sometimes crunches and eats up those kind people because they're given quite a lot of work to do. Academics, believe it or not, have a lot of key performance indicators they have to tick. You know, they have to be great researchers, they have to be great teachers, they have to be great administrators. It's just a crazy world full of KPIs for academics these days. So let's start with the don'ts. The very first advice I always give to my students is do not hide away from your supervisor, especially if you haven't done what you promised to do. Quite often we get feelings of guilt and we said we were going to finish that chapter, now we haven't finished it, so let's disappear. Your supervisor might be so busy that they haven't realized that 1 or 2 weeks have passed. In fact, 4 weeks might go by and the things are happening around us that we haven't realized, hey, I haven't heard from Johnny for so much time. And then I will write an email and say, hey, Johnny, where are you? Now, Johnny's hiding because they feel guilty, but actually you should do the opposite. If you haven't accomplished what you promised, go and have that meeting, even if it is that you're going to hear it from your supervisor. Now, don't do it too often where you don't deliver what you promised. I always say under promise, over deliver. But even if you have under-delivered, going and having that chat and hearing it, getting that kick up the bum might help you and motivate you to continue. But it's certainly what it will do. It will alert the supervisor that they might need to give you more support than they have been giving you up to that point. The second one, don't be that kind of PhD student, doctoral student that is a super complainer. It's always their fault. They did this to me. Nobody wants to hear somebody who complains about everything. So choose your battles, be very careful. You can be assertive. Maybe some of your rights aren't, maybe you're not treated very well. Some of your rights haven't come through as a student, and you do have rights. And of course, do complain diplomatically about things that should work and don't work, but don't be a super complainer. One of the tools that I have later will help you if you are that kind of person who always falls into that trap of wanting to complain. Don't pretend you have read or done things that you haven't. In other words, what I say to my students is don't bullshit to a bullshitter, because we will know that you are lying. Okay, we can see it in your body language. Most importantly, when we're talking about topics that we are very familiar with, academic topics, we will catch you out. If you misquote or don't quote and you try to describe, this is not high school. The people that are supervising you are probably going to be specialists until that point where you become the super specialist and you're far closer to literature than they could ever be, because this is your PhD. So don't pretend you have read a particular book. Don't pretend that you have written a chapter and you say, oh, I'm going to send it to you tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, oh, I'm going to send it to you in one day. So don't pretend. And it's the same as number 3, but don't lie about other things. You might not be pretending about reading, but you might be pretending that you know a particular software. For example, a supervisor says you're going to do qualitative research, you're going to use NVivo or Envivo, depending on their accent. NVivo has nothing to do with living la vida loca. It's a very specific qualitative software. The same if a supervisor tells you, do you know how to use Amos? And you say, sure, I know how to use Amos. And of course, if they start then talking about structural equation modeling and you don't know what the hell that is, then they will know straight away that you have been lying about you know how to use the software or not. More importantly, if they don't catch you out and you said you know how to use NVivo and then they expect to see a qualitative analysis, or you said you know how to use Amos for structural equation modeling and they expect to see it in 2, 3, 4 weeks, if you don't know it, then you have to rush into, I don't know, YouTube videos to find out how to use it. And trust me, it will take you far more than you think to learn a particular software. So you will never deliver when you said you would. So you will miss out on under-promising and over-delivering. You will under-deliver and you'll be caught out. Let's move to the do's. The very first thing you should be doing when you are meeting the supervisors early on, and remember I said supervisors in this case, because quite often you'll be put in teams where you have the lead supervisor, then you have at least one more supervisor. In some cases you have an extra 2 co-supervisors, so a team of 3 plus you 4. Have an initial meeting to plan what the year will look like. At that meeting, try to get a hint as to where, not even a hint, be clear. Say, when are you taking holidays, so that I make sure I don't communicate to you. Is it you go in July or you go in August? But also you plan your year so that you don't expect to give a huge chapter on the 1st of August when academics might take 3 weeks in August, okay? Do keep in touch and make sure that when you communicate effectively. Now, believe it or not, we're dealing with a lot of students, and although our PhD students are far less and they are at the top of our agenda, sometimes we get random emails. A student might use their personal email, send me an email, and I don't even recognize them because their name might be Johnny Smith and they have created a Hotmail account called I'm the Cool Dude at hotmail.com. And I get an email and says, hey, mate, I'm not sure what to do with that. And I'm like, well, who is this? What are you talking about? So communicate effectively. If you have instant messaging with your supervisor, if you have, I don't know, you're using Microsoft Teams or you're using some of the instant messaging apps, they might like that. In that initial meeting, find out how they like to communicate. And most importantly, keep in touch even when they don't expect you to keep in touch. So, once every week or every couple of weeks, ask them, give them a little update. How would you like to receive updates from me? Where I am, what I'm doing, and that way, you keep your PhD at the top of their mind. If you send an email a couple of weeks, let's say that you've gone away and you're supposed to read and write and meet again in 4 weeks. In the middle of those 4 weeks, in the 2 weeks, you send a quick update of what you've been up to. The third one is to make it a habit to be solutions oriented. When you go to a meeting with your supervisors, then let's say that you're confused and you don't know what to do with you've got a particular question, or you want to choose path 1 or path 2. Come with 3 paths, come with 3 solutions and say, look, I've got these solutions that I could follow, but I'm not sure which one, rather than go and say, what do I do now? What do I do next? Okay. Make it a habit. Supervisors love it when you present solutions to them and you then can debate as to which solution you think might be better. They'll help you and they'll mentor you through, but they don't have to start from the very, very beginning of coming up with the solution. And most supervisors, they'll expect you at that level to be able to come up with some answers yourself. Do take up on opportunities. If you've got some opportunities to teach, be proactive on how you take up those opportunities. Don't overdo it. Your PhD should be your focus, but sometimes breaking what you do give you an opportunity to be more relaxed, and your supervisors start looking at you more like a colleague rather than just a student. So take up any opportunities that improve your skills and your profile. Be proactive to send your CV, to have those interviews. Ask early on your supervisor if they would be happy to be your referee. Do join communities and make sure you utilize those workshops. For those of you who are going to have this very difficult supervisor and nothing works, sometimes you might end up doing a PhD with very limited or no supervision if you use the communities that exist and the workshops that exist cleverly enough. What are you talking, Yanis? Can I do a PhD without a supervisor? Yes-ish, you can. With very limited supervision, they have to sign certain things, so you still have that red tape, but you could do the majority of the work without much supervision. It's hard, but it's doable. And the communities will help you and they carry you through, not only from the skills that you will learn and the techniques and the tips that you might gain, but also mentally and psychologically, you will have other people who are going through similar scenarios, and you'll have a shoulder to cry on, or you'll get ideas. Number 6, do initiate the bookings of meetings and send work well in advance. Okay, don't expect a supervisor to read your 3 chapters one day before your meeting. So at that very initial meeting where we said plan, make sure that you also ask how much time do you normally need to read a chapter of X number of words, and they'll tell you. Number 7, do avoid having meetings with only one supervisor at a time. Make sure that you have organized team meetings. The worst thing that can happen to you is you have a meeting with one supervisor, then you have a separate meeting with another supervisor. They haven't talked to each other and they contradict. So send your work to both, or if you have 3 supervisors, to all 3 at the same time. Organize a time where everybody can meet. Now, if the odd meeting, one person is at a conference and they can't meet, that's okay. But don't make that a habit. Avoid having meeting with only one supervisor. Number 8, when you have a meeting, then minute that meeting or create action points and send that as an email back to the supervisor. Now, some universities even have a system. I mean, they might have a system called Ph.D. Manager where you can put the notes. Don't leave it for too long. You'll forget what happens. And I always say to my students, do it the same day, so it's over and done with, and you have a record of the actions that you should have taken and the actions that the supervisor, if any, should be taking. If you can't do it that day, do it the next day. Don't leave it longer than 3 days. You'll forget it, or you'll forget your notes. You'll go back to your notes and you won't remember what really happened. Anyway, these are all the do's and don'ts I have for you. I hope they help you. If you've got more, post them on the comments below. Have a lovely, lovely day.